Commander Vex Nala of the Korthani Imperial Fleet stared at the tactical display with what his species would generously call confidence, though any human observer might have recognized it as the particular brand of arrogance that precedes spectacular failure. The holographic readout showed a small blue-green planet spinning lazily in the void, completely unaware that its entire existence was about to become complicated. "Sir," chirped Lieutenant Yara Kun from her station, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence like a biological slot machine. "The Elder Council's final transmission is coming through. They seem agitated." Vex Nala's mandibles clicked in what passed for a chuckle among his kind. The Elders. Those ancient, wrinkled beings who spent their days croaking warnings about this species and that civilization, as if the galaxy was some sort of interstellar minefield. Honestly, after 300 years of conquest, you'd think they'd develop a little faith in military competence. "Put them through," he commanded, settling his considerable bulk into the command chair that groaned under his weight. The chair, much like the Elder Council's warnings, had been protesting for quite some time now. The hologram flickered to life, revealing Elder Zarnthek, whose face looked like someone had left a raisin in the sun for approximately 7 centuries. Her voice crackled with the weight of ages and what sounded suspiciously like panic. "Commander Vex Nala," she wheezed, "you must abort this mission immediately. The humans, they are not what they appear to be. With respect, Elder." Vex Nala replied, though his tone suggested respect was the last thing on his mind. "We've analyzed their military capabilities. They have crude chemical propulsion, primitive energy weapons, and their largest vessel is barely a tenth the size of our smallest frigate. They're barely out of their planetary cradle." The Elder's ancient eyes, milky with age but sharp with knowledge, fixed on him with the intensity of a dying star. "That is precisely what makes them dangerous, you fool. Young species are unpredictable, desperate. They do things that make no tactical sense because they haven't learned yet that certain things are impossible." Lieutenant Yara Kun suppressed what might have been a snort. The younger generation of Korthani had little patience for elder superstitions. They'd conquered 47 star systems without breaking a sweat, and now they were supposed to be afraid of a species that still used projectile weapons. "Please." "Elder Zarnthek." Vex Nala said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone typically reserved for explaining obvious concepts to particularly slow children. "We appreciate your concerns. However, intelligence reports indicate the humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. They're fractured, primitive, and completely unprepared for a coordinated assault from a superior civilization." The transmission flickered, and for a moment the Elder's face was lost in static. When it cleared, her expression had somehow managed to become even more grave, which was quite an achievement considering she already looked like she was attending her own funeral. "Commander," she said slowly, each word carrying the weight of prophecy, "there is an old saying among our people. Beware the prey that has spent 1,000 generations learning to kill its own kind. The humans have not been fighting each other in spite of their youth. They have been fighting each other because of it. Every conflict, every war, every petty border dispute has been a lesson in survival. They are not fractured, they are sharpened." The communication ended with an abrupt snap, leaving the bridge in an uncomfortable silence that stretched for exactly 3 seconds before Vex Nala burst into laughter. "Sharpened," he wheezed, his massive frame shaking with mirth. "Did you hear that, Yara Kun? The humans are sharpened. It's like kitchen utensils." "Very amusing, sir," Yara Kun agreed, though her tone suggested she found about as much humor in the situation as a tax audit. "Shall we proceed with the invasion?" "Absolutely. Signal the fleet. Operation Gentle Correction is now in effect." The name alone should have been a warning sign. Any military operation with the word gentle in its title was either about to go spectacularly wrong or had been named by someone with a deeply disturbing sense of irony. In this case, it was both. 3 hours later, the Korthani fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with all the subtlety of a freight train crashing through a library. 67 vessels of various sizes and classifications arranged themselves in what military textbooks would call a standard intimidation formation, which was essentially the galactic equivalent of flexing in front of a mirror. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Grixmon, his voice carrying the kind of professional calm that suggested he'd done this sort of thing many times before, "we're detecting primitive monitoring stations throughout the system. They've definitely seen us." "Excellent." Vex Nala rubbed his primary hands together in satisfaction. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The transmission that went out was a masterpiece of condescending diplomacy. Vex Nala had practiced the speech 17 times, making sure to hit just the right notes of superiority mixed with what he generously called mercy. The basic message was simple: surrender now, become part of the glorious Korthani Empire, and nobody had to get hurt. It was the same speech they'd used on the Vrelians, the Torthak Confederacy, and the Meklon Trade Union. It had worked beautifully every time. The response came back in less than 20 minutes, which by galactic standards was impressively quick. Most species took hours to craft their surrender documents. These humans were certainly efficient. "Sir," Yara Kin said, her voice carrying a note of confusion that made Vex Nala's mandibles twitch, "you're going to want to hear this yourself." The voice that came through the speakers was distinctly human, male, and carried what any Earthling would immediately recognize as a thick Brooklyn accent. What the Korthani heard was something that sounded like gravel being mixed in a cement truck. "Yeah, hi there, big scary space guys. This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the United Earth Defense Force. We got your little ultimatum, and I gotta say the boys in the war room had a good laugh. Real creative stuff. The part about inevitable subjugation was particularly artistic." Vex Nala's eyes narrowed. This was not the terrified babbling of a defeated species. This was something else entirely. The human continued, and there was something in his voice that made the bridge crew unconsciously lean forward. It was the tone of someone who'd been in too many fights to be impressed by size alone. "Now here's the thing, pal. See, we checked our calendar, and it turns out today's not actually a good day for getting conquered. We've got plans. Baseball season just started, my nephew's birthday is next week, and I promised my wife I'd fix the kitchen sink. So here's our counteroffer. You turn those fancy ships around and head back to whatever rock you crawled out from under, and we'll pretend this whole conversation never happened." The bridge fell silent. Even the background hum of the ship's systems seemed to quiet down, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Sir?" Yara Kin ventured carefully. Vex Nala's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like castanets in an earthquake. Did that primitive just refuse our generous offer?" "It appears so, sir. And did he call me pal?" "I believe he did, sir." For a moment, Vex Nala sat in stunned silence. In 3 centuries of military service, across 47 successful conquests, no one had ever called him pal. The sheer audacity was almost impressive, almost. "Very well," he said finally, his voice carrying the dangerous calm of a predator that had just decided playtime was over. "Signal the fleet. Deploy Battle Formation 7. If these humans want to learn about galactic hierarchy the hard way, we'll be happy to provide the education." "Sir," Grixmon called from his station, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. It looks like they're powering up some kind of defensive systems." "Let them," Vex Nala replied with cold satisfaction. "Their most powerful weapons are chemical explosives and primitive lasers. Against our shields, they might as well be throwing rocks." That particular statement would later be entered into the Galactic archives as example number 1 of famous last words, filed right between what could possibly go wrong. And how dangerous could it be? The first sign that things were not going according to plan came when Earth's moon suddenly lit up like a cosmic Christmas tree. What the Korthani had assumed was a lifeless satellite was apparently riddled with weapon emplacements that had been very cleverly disguised as, well, nothing at all. "Sir," Grixmon reported, his voice climbing several octaves, "the moon it's armed. heavily armed. I'm reading at least 300 individual weapon signatures, and they're all targeting our fleet. Impossible, Vex Nala snapped. Our scouts would have detected any significant installations. Unless Yara Kin said quietly, they built them on the far side where we couldn't see them. The implications of that statement settled over the bridge like a cold fog. If the humans had anticipated a threat from space and had taken steps to prepare for it, then maybe, just maybe, they weren't quite as primitive as their technology suggested. The second sign came when their long-range sensors detected something that made absolutely no sense according to everything they knew about human capabilities. A massive structure was rising from the Pacific Ocean, shedding water like some mechanical leviathan emerging from the depths. "What is that thing?" Vex Nala demanded. Grixmon's claws danced over his console, pulling up every scan, every reading, every piece of data he could gather. Sir, it appears to be a space elevator, but the engineering required to build something like that underwater and then raise it would require a level of coordination and long-term planning that supposedly fractured species don't possess, Yara Kin finished grimly. The third sign was the one that made Vex Nala's blood run cold. It wasn't what appeared on their sensors. It was what didn't appear. "Grixmon," he said slowly, "where are their military vessels?" The tactical officer checked his readings twice before responding. "Sir, I'm not detecting any significant spacecraft in the immediate area. A few orbital stations, some communication satellites, but nothing that registers as a military threat." "Then where," Vex Nala asked with growing unease, "is their fleet?" The answer came in the form of Admiral Kane's voice crackling over the communications system again, and this time there was something in his tone that made the Korthani bridge crew involuntarily shiver. "Sorry about the delay, folks. Had to get everyone in position. See, the thing about us humans is, we learn real quick that the best defense isn't always about having the biggest stick. Sometimes it's about making sure the other guy doesn't see your stick coming until it's too late." That's when the asteroids began to move. Not all of them. Just the ones that had been very carefully selected, hollowed out, equipped with engines and guidance systems, and set in orbital patterns that looked completely natural to anyone who wasn't looking too closely. The ones that had been prepared over the course of decades by a species that had learned, through countless conflicts with itself, that survival often depended on being 3 steps ahead of your enemy. "Sir," Grixmon's voice cracked like a teenager's. "I'm reading engine signatures from 17 different asteroids. They're on intercept courses with our formation." Vex Nala stared at the tactical display as it lit up with new contacts, each one representing a chunk of rock the size of a small moon, accelerating toward his fleet with the inexorable patience of gravity itself. "How long," he asked quietly, "until impact?" "Approximately 4 hours, sir." 4 hours? 4 hours to contemplate the fact that while the Korthani had been congratulating themselves on their superior technology and advanced civilization, the humans had been turning their entire solar system into a weapon. "Sir," Yara Kin said carefully, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal, reassess the situation." Vex Nala's pride warred with his growing realization that they might have catastrophically underestimated their opponents. Pride won, as it usually did, right up until the moment it didn't. "Absolutely not," he declared. "We are the Korthani Imperial Fleet. We do not retreat from primitives hurling rocks. All ships prepare for evasive maneuvers, target the asteroids with our primary weapons. We'll turn their little surprise into cosmic dust." The order went out, and 67 warships began unleashing the fury of their advanced weaponry on the approaching asteroids. Energy beams that could crack a planet's crust, missiles that could level cities, particle cannons that could boil oceans, all focused on what should have been easy targets. The asteroids, however, had not read the tactical manual that explained how they were supposed to respond to such treatment. Instead of breaking apart or vaporizing as expected, they absorbed the punishment and kept coming. Because the humans, in their infinite creativity, had not simply hollowed out rocks and strapped engines to them. They had lined them with every piece of salvaged armor plating, discarded hull metal, and scrap composite they could get their hands on. They had filled the gaps with concrete steel rebar, and in at least 3 cases, the remains of decommissioned nuclear submarines. They had turned each asteroid into the cosmic equivalent of an armored bulldozer designed not for elegance or efficiency, but for the simple purpose of absorbing an enormous amount of punishment while continuing to move forward. Sir, Grixmon reported with the hollow tone of someone watching their worldview crumble in real time, the asteroids are still on course. Our weapons are having minimal effect. That's impossible. Sir, with respect, I think we're going to need to expand our definition of impossible. As if to punctuate his point, Admiral Kane's voice filled the bridge once more, carrying what could only be described as malicious cheerfulness. Having trouble with our little rocks, boys? See, here's the thing about humans. We've been fighting each other for so long that we've gotten real good at figuring out how to break things that aren't supposed to break. And more importantly, we've gotten even better at building things that aren't supposed to break when people try to break them. Vexnala felt something cold settling in his stomach. Something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine fear. 3 hours to impact, sir, Grixmon announced. 3 hours until 17 armored asteroids, each one guided by human ingenuity and propelled by human determination, would reach his fleet. 3 hours to figure out how to deal with an enemy that had apparently spent decades preparing for a war that hadn't even started yet. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexnala began to suspect that Elder Zonthek might have been right about something. The humans weren't just young and desperate. They were young, desperate, and they had been planning for this moment since they first looked up at the stars and wondered what else might be looking back. 2 hours and 37 minutes until impact, and Commander Vexnala was learning valuable lessons about human psychology that weren't covered in any military academy textbook. Lesson number 1, when humans said they had plans, they really meant it. Sir, Lieutenant Yara Kin called from her station, her voice carrying the particular strain that came from watching one's career prospects evaporate in real time. We're receiving another transmission from the surface. Of course we are, Vexnala muttered. Because apparently the humans weren't content with simply throwing rocks at them. No, they had to provide commentary while doing it. It was like being murdered by a particularly chatty assassin. Admiral Kane's voice filled the bridge again, but this time he wasn't alone. There were other voices in the background, speaking in different accents, different languages, creating a chorus of what sounded suspiciously like coordination on a global scale. "Hope you boys are enjoying the light show," Kane said, and Vexnala could practically hear the grin in his voice. "Thought you might want to know what you're really dealing with here. See, that elder of yours wasn't entirely wrong. We humans have been fighting each other for a long time. But here's what she didn't mention. We've also been learning to work together when something bigger and uglier shows up at our door." "Impossible," Vexnala said automatically, though the word was starting to lose its meaning. "Our intelligence clearly showed your species is fragmented into competing nation-states." "Oh, we are," Kane replied cheerfully. "Trust me, we still argue about everything. Territory, resources, who makes the best pizza, whether pineapple belongs on said pizza. Basic human stuff. But you know what's funny about humans? Nothing brings us together quite like someone from outside trying to tell us what to do." A new voice joined the transmission, this one carrying what any Earth resident would recognize as a crisp British accent. "Commander Vexnala, this is General Patricia Winters, European Space Defense Command. The Admiral is being modest. When your scout ship started sniffing around our system 18 months ago, we didn't just notice. We called a meeting." 18 months? Yara Kin whispered, her 6 eyes wide with horrified realization. A third voice, speaking with a Russian accent that could cut glass, added his contribution to the conversation. "Colonel Dmitry Volkov, Siberian Deep Space Monitoring. We have been watching you watch us for a very long time. Your stealth technology is good, but human paranoia is better. More voices joined in, creating a symphony of human cooperation that sent chills down Vexnala's spine. Chinese, Japanese, Brazilian, South African, Australian, Canadian, voices from every corner of a planet that was supposed to be divided and weak. You see, Kane continued, while you were congratulating yourselves on your superior technology and advanced civilization, we were doing what humans do best, preparing for the worst possible scenario. We figured if someone was scouting us, they'd eventually come calling. So we made some preparations. 2 hours, 15 minutes until impact, Grixmon announced, his voice barely above a whisper. Sir, Yarakin said carefully, perhaps we should consider that tactical withdrawal now. Before Vexnala could respond, his communications officer raised a claw for attention. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Elder Council. Now they call, Vexnala snarled. Put them through. Elder Xanthek's ancient face appeared on the hologram, and if she had looked worried before, now she looked positively apocalyptic. Behind her, other elders were visible, all wearing expressions that suggested they were attending a funeral. Their own. Commander, she wheezed, please tell me you have not engaged the humans in combat. We haven't fired a shot, Vexnala replied, which was technically true. The asteroids were doing all the work. Thank the void, the elder breathed. There may still be time to salvage this situation. Salvage what situation? They're throwing rocks at us, Elder. Rocks. We are the Corthani Imperial Fleet. We don't retreat from flying debris. The Elder's milky eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. You fool. Those aren't just rocks. Let me tell you about the Zephyrian Armada. Vexnala felt his mandibles stop clicking. The Zephyrian Armada was legend. A fleet of 10,000 ships that had vanished without a trace 500 years ago while investigating reports of a primitive species on the galaxy's rim. The Zephyrians found a young species too, the Elder continued. Technologically inferior, fractured, easy prey, the species called themselves the Horthak. They threw rocks at the Zephyrian fleet. And there are no Zephyrians anymore, Commander. The Horthak turned every moon, every asteroid, every piece of space debris in their system into a weapon. The Zephyrian Armada was recycled. Their ships' hulls were turned into more weapons. Their crew became fertilizer for Horthak agricultural worlds. The bridge fell silent except for the steady countdown from Grixmon. 2 hours, 7 minutes until impact. The Horthak, Elder Xanthek continued relentlessly, were considered primitive because they used kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded terrifyingly familiar. Sir, Yarakin said quietly, incoming transmission from Earth. This time it wasn't Admiral Kane. The voice was younger, female, carrying what sounded like an American Southern accent mixed with something that might have been barely controlled fury. This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Director of the Terra Defense Initiative. I believe you've met our kinetic countermeasures. Impressive, aren't they? See, while your scouts were cataloging our primitive technology, my team was working on some improvements. Those asteroids heading your way, they're not just armored. They're smart. Smart? Vexnala croaked. Each one has an artificial intelligence system designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. They've been running combat simulations for the past year, learning Corthani tactics from the data your own scouts transmitted back to your fleet. They know exactly how you're going to try to evade them. As if to prove her point, the asteroids suddenly changed course, adjusting their trajectories with a precision that made the bridge crew collectively gasp. The random scatter pattern they'd been following transformed into a coordinated formation that would envelope the entire Corthani fleet. 1 hour, 53 minutes until impact, Grixmon reported with the tone of someone announcing the end of the world. But wait, Dr. Mitchell continued with the enthusiasm of someone presenting a particularly disturbing science project. There's more. Those aren't the only surprises we prepared. Tell me, Commander, what do you know about human mining operations? Vex Nala didn't answer, mostly because he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "We're very good at digging holes," she explained helpfully. "Very deep holes, very big holes, all throughout our solar system. Mars has some lovely caves now, so does Jupiter's moon Europa. Funny thing about those caves, though, they're not empty anymore." On cue, the long-range sensors began detecting new energy signatures. Not from Earth. Not from the moon. From everywhere. Mars, Europa, Ganymede, Titan, even the asteroid belt itself was lighting up with what could only be weapon emplacements. "How many?" Vex Nala whispered. "Oh, I'd say about 15,000 individual installations," Dr. Mitchell replied casually. "Give or take a few hundred. We weren't really keeping count after the first 10,000. At that point, it just became a question of how much industrial capacity we could repurpose without anybody back home noticing their tax dollars at work." Yarakin was frantically working her console, trying to get accurate readings on the new threats. "Sir, the energy signatures are consistent with antimatter weapons. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them." "Antimatter?" Vex Nala's voice cracked. "But your species doesn't have antimatter technology." "We didn't," Dr. Mitchell agreed cheerfully. "Right up until we did. Funny how necessity motivates innovation. When you're facing extinction, you tend to solve problems faster than usual. My team managed to crack practical antimatter containment in about 8 months. Turns out the solution was embarrassingly simple once we stopped thinking about it the right way." Admiral Kane's voice joined the transmission again. "See, Commander, here's the thing about young species. We don't know what's impossible yet. So when someone shows up and tells us we can't win, we tend to take that as a challenge rather than a statement of fact." 1 hour, 37 minutes until impact, Grixmon announced. Elder Xanthek's transmission crackled back to life. "Commander, you must withdraw immediately. Signal full retreat. Abandon the mission. The humans have turned their entire solar system into a death trap." "We can't retreat," Vex Nala said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The honor of the Empire." "The honor of the Empire," the Elder snapped with more energy than she'd shown in decades, "will not be served by the complete annihilation of our finest fleet. Swallow your pride, Commander. Live to fight another day." But even as she spoke, new contacts were appearing on the tactical display. Ships, human ships rising from the planets and moons like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. They were small by Corthani standards, barely frigate-sized, but there were so many of them that they turned the display into a sea of red warning indicators. "Sir," Grixmon reported with growing panic, "I count over 3,000 individual vessels. They're moving to surround us." Dr. Mitchell's voice returned with what sounded like scientific curiosity. "Oh. Those? Those are our rapid response craft. Each one crewed by volunteers who specifically requested combat assignments against hostile alien forces. You'd be surprised how many humans signed up once word got out about your little invasion. Turns out we have some very strong feelings about invited guests." "We accept your surrender," Vex Nala said suddenly, the words tumbling out before his pride could stop them. "I'm sorry." Admiral Kane replied, "But I don't think you understand the situation. You don't get to surrender. See, the thing is, we humans have a bit of a reputation problem. If word gets out that some random alien fleet can just show up, threaten us, and then leave when things get inconvenient, well, that sets a bad precedent. Other folks might get ideas." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, Commander, that you came here to conquer us, to add us to your little empire, to turn humanity into just another subject species in your collection. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in uniting our entire species against you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence except for Grixmon's relentless countdown. 1 hour, 12 minutes until impact. Vex Nala slumped in his command chair, the weight of realization crushing down on him like a collapsing star. They hadn't just underestimated the humans. They had walked into a trap that had been 18 months in the making. A trap built by a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to fight impossible odds and win through sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. "Sir," Yarakin said quietly, "orders." For a long moment, Vexnala said nothing. Then, slowly, he straightened in his chair and looked around at his crew. Good soldiers, loyal soldiers, soldiers who deserved better than to die because their commander had been too arrogant to listen to warnings from those wiser than himself. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All ships are to power down weapons and prepare for negotiations." "Sir." "God." "We're going to surrender," he said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "And then we're going to pray that these humans are more merciful than we would have been in their place." The surrender was broadcast on all frequencies, transmitted to every human listening post in the solar system. The response came back within minutes, not from Admiral Kane or Dr. Mitchell, but from someone new. The voice was elderly, gentle, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to shout to be heard. "This is Secretary General Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Council. Commander Vexnala, your surrender is acknowledged. However, there are conditions." "Name them," Vexnala replied, because at this point he was hardly in a position to negotiate. "First, all Corthani vessels will be escorted to designated holding areas in the outer system. Second, your crews will be transferred to secure facilities for processing. Third, complete technical specifications for all Corthani technology will be provided for our analysis. And fourth." She paused, and in that pause Vexnala heard the sound of humanity's future being written. "Fourth, you will provide us with the location of every Corthani world, every military installation, every shipyard and manufacturing facility in your empire. Because, Commander, we've decided that the galaxy would be a much safer place if the Corthani Empire wasn't in it anymore." The implications hit him like a physical blow. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were planning to go on the offensive. A species that had never left its own solar system was preparing to wage war across the galaxy. "You can't," he whispered. "You don't have the ships, the infrastructure, the experience." "We didn't have antimatter technology either," Secretary General Vasquez replied calmly. "We didn't have a unified planetary government. We didn't have interstellar weapons platforms. Funny how quickly things change when you're properly motivated." Elder Zanthek's transmission flickered back to life one final time. Her ancient face was wet with what might have been tears. "Commander," she said softly, "do you understand now? Do you see why we warned you?" Vexnala nodded slowly. He understood. The elders had tried to tell them that young species were dangerous not despite their youth, but because of it. Because they hadn't yet learned that some things were impossible. Because they hadn't yet accepted that some fights couldn't be won. Because when you threatened a young species, you didn't just face their current capabilities. You faced their potential, and humanity's potential, as it turned out, was absolutely terrifying. "The galaxy," Elder Zonthek continued, "is about to change. The humans are no longer content to stay in their little corner of space. You have given them reason to look outward, to expand, to carry their particular brand of stubborn defiance to the stars. May the void help us all." As the Corthani fleet powered down their weapons and prepared for what history would remember as the most one-sided surrender in galactic history, Commander Vexnala reflected on the lessons learned. The elders had been right. Young species were dangerous. But they had been wrong about one thing. The humans weren't dangerous because they were young and desperate. They were dangerous because they were young, desperate, and absolutely, completely, utterly unwilling to go quietly into that good night. The invasion of Earth had lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. The human expansion into the galaxy began that same day. Some lessons, Vexnala thought as he watched human ships approaching his flagship, were learned too late to do any good. The elders had warned them not to provoke Earth's young. The warning had been ignored. And now, as the first human boarding parties prepared to take control of Corthani vessels, The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you woke a sleeping giant that had spent its entire history learning how to fight.